Hello everyone, it's Zara Altair and this is the Midweek Zap, and apologies for a little bit of lateness. We were having so much fun in the green room we lost track of time, and Kristen, thank goodness, helped us. So today our guest is Enge of
Enge.
Simple Consulting, and our special comment wrangler today, woohoo, Kristen Drysdale. So she's going to be pulling up questions and comments. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. So Eric, welcome, and tell us just a little bit about yourself for those who don't know who you are.
Sure. I'm CEO of Stone Temple Consulting. We're just under 50 people in size at this point. Been doing SEO and other types of digital marketing for 12 years. I'm a tech geek. I'm a lover of wine. I promised Thomas Hanna, I told you I was going to bring wine. I did. And this is a very good bottle, by the way. Kamen, K-A-M-E-N, Cabernet Sauvignon. So, you know, I'm also a father of 3 great kids. So that's another side of me. All of them are in college at the moment. So. That's me in a nutshell.
All right, thank you, and thank you again for being here. So today we're going to roam around with the concept of brand and reputation, and I always like to start with definitions so we're all on the same base level. So let's hear from Eric Enge. What does brand mean to you?
Well, you know, it's funny you asked that question, Zara, and I actually decided to look up the dictionary definition because it's always an interesting place to start, and it's actually surprisingly light in content. A type of product manufactured by a particular company under a particular name. You know, how boring is that, right? I figured that was better than an identifying mark burned on livestock, which is, of course, a different kind of brand. But so when I think about brand, though, to me, when you have a brand, there are values or characteristics that people associate with it, cultivating those to be the ones that you would like them to be. Through your behavior, your actions, and the things you do is an incredibly important part of developing that brand. So, just to sort of restate it, it's a set of values and attributes associated with you or your company. It's, to me, what I think of as a brand.
Okay, thank you. That was very clear. And then from that, your definition of reputation.
So, well, that actually starts to bleed over into how I modified the definition of a brand.
Yes, it does.
For sure. Because the reputation, again, is what people think about you, or the beliefs or opinions that people have about something. Of course, reputation isn't necessarily positive, right? You can have a reputation as a cheapskate, as a cheat. So far, I'm not doing the selling side of the brand here, by the way. So obviously, you want to have a reputation of somebody who really, does what they say they'll do, and those kinds of things. So, but you can take part of the way I define brand and say that's really what the reputation is.
Okay, that's great. And then do you have any strategies to recommend to people about curating their reputation, I guess I would say, and that is, short-term, long-term? What are some things that people can do to keep that positive, not a cheapskate, not a cheat reputation?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And The first thing I think you have to do really is you have to step back and say, what do I want my reputation to be? Because quite honestly, there are businesses where having the cheapest price is actually the reputation you want, which, being cheap, not in the negative sense of it, or being cheap isn't always negative, right? If I can save $1.25 on buying something, then that's the value that I'm looking for as a consumer of that something. On the other hand, you might want to be the very best, the highest quality. You might want to have the best service. So what that means to me is you now need to really step back and first of all define what those things you want to be known for and what that is. And once you have that, you can then begin working on getting people to believe that about you. But I'm going to stop since you popped up a question.
Yeah, I popped up Tim Sweeney, who can't engage with us because he's on mobile device, but he had a question for you, and that was, does Google maintain a database or databases containing data records for each entity, whether it's a person, brand, etc.? And if so, how can we as marketers tap into it? I'm thinking something along the lines of comparing Google to Epsilon here.
Yeah, that's a great question. Google is very interested in understanding who entities are, and entities can mean things like a place, a company, a person, from Google's perspective. And yes, they do have data on who these various entities are, and you can see that. You can pull up your phone and ask it, a query like, where is the Empire State Building, and it will tell you. It will read back the street address. So they do keep data like that. I'm sure they are trying to monitor things like what we'll call sentiment data, like do people tend to like the Empire State Building or dislike it, or those kinds of things. They try to understand about it. That's a very hard thing for them to do well, though, largely because the processing power involved in understanding how somebody feels about something based on very small amounts of signals online is hard. It's a very hard problem. Unfortunately, I don't think there's an easy way for us to tap into that. How Google's going to come at something like this is they're going to notice when they send someone to your website or a page on your site, how long is it before they come back and do another search? So that's what we call dwell time, right? So if somebody spends a minute before they come back, then Google knows that. They can measure dwell time, and we actually had proof a while back that they were measuring that attribute. Another thing they can measure is, let's say someone searches on women's shoes and you're listed first, and then they go to your page in the search results and they click on it, and then they come back in 3 seconds, very short period of time, and then they click on the next search result, and then they don't come back. Well, if you think about what that scenario might mean, it doesn't really look very good for you, right? It doesn't look like you answered that user's need because they spent very little time on your site. Not only did they only spend very little time, but they popped right back to the search results and they went somewhere else.
Right.
So this is the kind of thing that Google can measure. It's pretty mechanical, but they do measure it, and they do try to use it.
Okay, and then Tim had a follow-up to that question, and he asked, what other Google sources are used to power Google search results? For example, Chrome browser, Android platform or device, Gmail, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question as well, and it's one that's very popular. In 2013, we actually ran a test, and that test was to see whether or not Google was using data from Chrome or Google Analytics to detect and or index content on the web. And the test came back and suggested that no, they weren't doing that. The simple explanation of the test is we created some new content, we put it in on a web page, and it didn't. But we didn't link to it from anywhere, and we didn't socially share it from anything. So Google really had no way to know about it. And then we visited with a whole bunch of different machines using Chrome browsers. All right, and Google never even crawled the page.
Ah, okay.
Corresponding tests that we did do, which show something they do use, is we did a similar thing with a web page, and we had somebody share it in Google+. We had a few people share it in Google+. Google visited that web page in 6 minutes. So Google was using Google+ to discover new web pages, but it wasn't really used as a ranking factor for what I'll call non-personalized search. It gets to be a very complicated question that Tim answered, by the way, because I can keep peeling back another layer on the onion over and over.
Right, exactly. And and I think the concern, at least for this conversation, is, you know, that's something to take note, because where the search comes from is important, which is a clue for someone who's in marketing, for example, about where to put things to bring people or to lead people to. I feel like Ronnie Benzer. To lead, yes, to lead people to that article or to that page. That's going to be important in your overall strategy. Is that correct?
Well, you do have to understand how to create visibility for yourself, right? And the details of the mechanics of that story are very complex, as I just alluded to. I'm in the middle of writing an article for Jay Baer's blog on convincingconvert.com, and he asked me to try to tackle this topic, and I started outlining it, and then I wrote him back an email and said, Jay, this is going to be a 4,000-word article. It's just, there's too many different scenarios. So, but what I'm doing instead is writing an article about just how sort of the right way to think about how social media influences SEO, which is, it's kind of like a, excuse me, a built-in PR channel. And it's a very powerful built-in PR channel, because it gets you, your stuff in front of a lot of different people. And there's there's really 3 ways to get at that channel. And I'll just use Google Plus as example, but the same logic does apply to other social networks. You can build your own strong following, you can participate in communities, or you can build relationships with people with large followings who, well, and they don't all have to have just with lots of other people, but presumably some of them have large followings, and get them to share your stuff. And all 3 of those things get you in front of audiences for your content, right? That may or may not drive SEO value. Indirectly, it certainly does, because some of those people who see it might link to it, and we know that links are an SEO ranking factor, and no one argues about that, more or less. This notion of being active on social media as a way of building up your own PR channel is really an awesome way to go about things.
It is. And then I have something from Alan Jones here. Alan says, Google measures it in a more complex way. A click and return to search in under 10 seconds is dismissed as a misclick, and return to search in over 50 seconds is treated as a search for further info. So the danger point is a return to search in 20 to 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's pretty specific, Ammon. I haven't actually, I don't think Google has ever disclosed anything about what those time intervals look like. Conceptually, I'm with you. The numbers, again, seem a little bit too specific to me, but I think certainly they tried to measure all these things, and I think the scenarios differ. So just as you say, it's much more complex, Ammon, so I agree with you, and I'm going to sort of complicate it a little bit more. If you are doing a shopping-oriented query, the time intervals will probably be treated entirely differently again, because you're probably just in comparison shopping mode. And that would be different than an information-oriented query or looking for a zip code. So I think it's also query dependent. I was just trying to keep it sort of not get all the complexity into it, because there are many layers to how you can think about it.
Okay, and Lee Life has a question. Is there a copyright issue with Google giving answers from an encyclopedia or dictionary?
Yeah, great question. This is one that's very popular right now. Also layers to this question. The first layer is if the information is what we call public domain information, then absolutely no issue at all. And this is something that's very important for publishers to understand. Don't build your business on a business plan of getting traffic to your website to return public domain information. And there are people who have done this. That's why I'm saying that, right? So Washington State, the capital is not Seattle, it's Olympia, I believe, and that's public domain information, right? So there is no copyright possible on that. So since you mentioned an encyclopedia or a dictionary, well, certainly in the encyclopedia case, you may be pulling out information, excuse me, which is public domain. But there's a separate aspect of this, which is even with public domain information, a specific rendering of that information could still be copyrightable. If I write a lengthy article about how Olympia came to be the capital of Washington, and I create a lot of other context, and I replicate that, even if all the elements of the article are essentially public domain, that specific rendering actually can be copyrighted. So, by the way, maybe somewhere along the way someone will ask a simple question, but this, because this one's complicated too, and I'm sure Emin will toss in some refinements to what I'm saying here, but I'm sure he'll agree that
he just says that is from Google.
Are you referring there, Emin, to the 10-second number? Is that what he's commenting on there? So that's my question back to you, Emin, because
I think it was the Google blog, but it may have been a patent, but it was definitely one of the known names of Google.
I could believe it would be in a patent, but I would also believe that it's something that they have to be tuning that. Emin, I'm sure you'll agree with that that they'll have some place they started in some theory they started with, and then they just see what works best, and they move the number around. And as I said, I'm sure it differs by scenarios. But as for the copyright thing, dictionary could be a different area. And by the way, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just giving you my opinion. I mean, I read a moment ago a couple of dictionary definitions. It may be that the specific definition used in Webster's differs slightly from the definition used in some other dictionary. They probably are different and those specific instances may be copyright, and in which case it could be copyrighted. But that's really what it hinges on, is whether you're dealing with public domain versus copyrightable information. So having said that, let me clarify something which I think might be interesting for the viewers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that in the survey that we published last Tuesday, last week, on Google Now versus Siri versus Cortana, we analyzed a whole over 3,000 queries, and we got a number of results back from Google for what we call step-by-step instructions. So if you put up, well, here, I'll just do a quick example. How to reset iPhone. And that will bring up a step-by-step instruction. And I am going to hopefully share that here in the screen. And you see that there's this is what we call step-by-step instructions. And what's interesting about this is that you look at this and the entire set of instructions is right here in the search results, right? And so this is where people get upset because there's no incentive to click through to the website for this information. However, in our test, we found of the 250 instances of step-by-step instructions we found, only 21% of those showed the complete instructions. And so that meant 79% showed only some of the steps, and you had to click through to get the full recipe, so to speak.
Okay, and then we have a follow-up from William Rock on something you said earlier, and that is lots of question marks. Why just get in front of big people? That is trying to manipulate, isn't it?
So great question from William. And William, you'll notice that the words came out of my mouth initially that way, and then I changed it because it is too narrow a point of view to say that you should only get in front of, call them influencers. Because sure, that's useful to have a very influential person reshare your content and that kind of thing, but it really, life can't really work that way. And I'll explain what I mean. I'm going to give an analogy. It's my favorite analogy for this. I like to talk about how you've just moved to a neighborhood and you're at the neighborhood party for the first time ever, and you know there's one person in the crowd that you have a particular interest in, and then you go and you sit in the corner of the party the whole time, and you kind of hear like this, just talking to them right in there, you know, and you don't talk to anyone else, right? Well, the problem is that everybody at the party notices, and they're a little weirded out, including the person you're talking to, right? And it's just too intense, and it's not natural, and it's really important, to William's point, to be part of the whole community. You know, it's because that sort of genuine behavior, you know, by the way, is a big part of getting influencers interested in interacting with you, right? Because they don't want someone who's obsessing over them. They don't want to be stalked any more than anyone else wants to be stalked, right? Right. So that's kind of the, you know, the way that goes.
Yes, and I just wanted to let everyone know that our comment wrangler is having trouble with comment tracker, and so she can't pull things up. So, but thank you, thank you, Kristen. And then we have a question from Thomas Hanna. So, Eric Enge, is there a difference in how you would go about building relationships that lead to links versus relationships that lead to social shares?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm hoping, Thomas, that you noticed that I did honor my promise to bring wine, so I'm just showing it again because now I know you're out there. So um, I'd say, I mean, I could conceive of a difference in how I might do it, but I don't actually really think about it that way. But I'm actually going to use your question, Thomas, to just sort of expand upon the answer I just gave to William, which is, you know, if you're someone like me and you know, for example, that hey, you'd like to be able to write for Forbes, which was, you know, something I was trying to manage to do, start being able to do 6, 7, 8 months ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, but a while back. Of course, there's going to be situations where you're a little bit more purpose-driven, right? Because at that point, I needed to develop a relationship with someone at Forbes to give me a shot, right? And in that case, I did some things to try to figure out how to get that relationship in place. And actually, what I ended up doing is I got some help from a good friend of mine who's in PR, a guy called Greg Jarbo over at SEO PR, great guy. And he actually didn't have to do that much. What he observed is that there was this guy there who had co-published an article with someone else and said, hey, you could reach out to him and suggest you do the same. And, you know, and reach out to that same guy and ask if you could co-publish an article. It's kind of a way to get a toe in the door. So while it's absolutely important to be part of the entire community, there are going to be times where it does make sense to do something a bit more targeted. And then you have to think about what's the right way to do that, right? Because, again, you don't start the conversation, oh, I'm going to go back to my neighborhood party. So here you are at the neighborhood party for the first time. You don't go around to everybody at the party and the first thing you ever say to them is, you know, hi, I'm Eric, can I have $5, please? Right? It just doesn't work that way, right? You know, you find ways to get into conversations about things relevant to that person, add value to whatever they're doing. Really very, very important to understand the mechanics of how to do that. And they're just very social mechanics, right?
That is. And then we have a long follow-up from Evan again. He says, because it was about because it was about bounces, not something code could fix so much. They were surprisingly open about the numbers to highlight how they can look at even one relatively simple piece of data in complex ways before it was useful.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I could believe that. And you know, I would still anticipate that they've probably changed it many times because that's just their DNA. But that makes sense, Sam, and thanks for digging that up.
And then William Rock has one more question, and that is, the click-through is a link just below the content?
Okay. I'm not sure of the context of the question, William. You might have to refire that one with a little more clarification. Unless Zara or Kristen, you know where he's coming from. So.
I'm not quite certain either, but I just wanted to let you know, Eric, that we have a lot of people joining you and enjoying wine, and Heidi and Deborah Rock. So we sparked a chord there. And Ammon John says, okay. John says, I'll give you $5 for the wine.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not
Hey,
even
Amber,
pounds.
go, Amber, your next assignment is go do a search and see how much that KEMEN 2011 Cabernet costs.
Oh, we have Ammon at work because I have him on chat, like trying to figure out comment tracker and all this, and he's been helping me there too. Yeah, we're sending him all sorts of different missions.
Well, there you go. Well, I mean, he brought up the offer for the wine, so I mean, you might just have to go a tad higher.
And then I have a question about, brand and reputation from a marketer's perspective, and what is the data that we as entities should be looking at to get feedback about what's happening with our reputation and who's checking and all that sort of stuff. What are some key tools that we can use to fine-tune what's happening with the messages we put out there?
Yeah, great question. So I think one starting tool is to actually just monitor how much your brand gets searched on, right? And you can use something like Google Trends to do that, and of course you have to have a certain amount of volume. Oh, Kristen's got it working, and that's a great thing to do. Social media listening, right? Monitoring mentions of your brand name online and seeing what people are saying is a great strategy. Google News monitoring, just seeing what people are saying about you there. These are all good things that you can do to learn what's going on and what people are saying about you. The really operative thing, though, because there've been a lot of conversations around Google Plus of late about the importance of the word that I just used of like listening, and not just like spewing things out there and keep pushing your message all the time. You really have to step back and use the available tools. Now, in all honesty, I'm not the one who's day-to-day, heavy-duty doing such monitoring, but social media listening is in Google News monitoring of news mentions, very powerful techniques to use.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's really helpful for people who are just starting out and trying to fine-tune and hone their brand, and even if they've thought about, what is it that I want my brand to represent and to be, to help them fine-tune when they're starting out, is to just get that feedback and see where they're being noticed. It helps a lot, and it helps also to make decisions about possibly shifting where you spend more time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so thank you very much. And then, Kristen, you had something for us.
Oh, pop that back up there, Kristen.
Back up.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so William Rock says, oops, sorry about that last post. Wrong post. Oops, knowledge graph rocks. And we've been using this since 2001. How does this apply in our conversation?
It is another good question. So knowledge graph, so first of all, for those who don't really understand what that is, it's Google's process of assembling information on disassembling knowledge in a way where they can process it differently. Traditional search involved them recognizing strings on web pages and matching them up with strings in search queries. And the knowledge graph is about understanding things and attributes about those things and relationships. So, as a New England Patriots fan, Tom Brady is a person, and he has height, That's an attribute about him. And then he has a spouse and he has children, and those are relationships, right? So those kinds of things are really what the knowledge graph is about so far, but well, I mean, that's a large part of what it's been about. They're extending that to other kinds of knowledge, and I showed one earlier, like the step-by-step instructions is a type of knowledge, right? And Google considers that part of the knowledge graph, although it wasn't really part of it when they first launched it. That's an extension they've made. So in terms of how all this relates to building brand and reputation, as I've noted, they really do want to understand who you are, whether you're a company or a person, as an entity, and they want to understand the relationships, and they ultimately do want to understand sentiment, and they're going to keep investing in that and getting better and better at that. So that's how I think it relates. So you really should be doing all this social monitoring. I think Kristen just popped up another comment.
Popped up an agreement.
Kristen, yes, an agreement. Sign here, and I agree with Eamon Johns. No.
Eamon says, 100% agree with Eric that monitoring brand search, the volume of search for your brand names, trademark terms, and URL are all good signs and things that should be in your metrics. So, yay.
Yeah, and to tie it back to William's question, ultimately, Google and Bing, for that matter, want to understand this better. It's just a very complicated problem. If I had to guess, and I'm wild guessing here, we're probably 2-3 years away before they do a seriously decent job of sentiment monitoring at Google. We can do it much more easily as humans, and we should be doing it. I'm guessing it's a little ways away for them.
Just reading the responses that we get and getting a feel for whether it's positive, neutral, or negative. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. So when Eamon Johns writes a comment and says, "Oh, you unbelievable idiot, Eric, you got that answer completely wrong," I'm not picking on you, really, Eamon, and I'm not inviting you to pick on me either. But that's probably negative sentiment. And then when he writes 100% agree with Eric Enge, that's probably positive sentiment. So, that's and you can't. Another really important reputation point that I want to make is, as your visibility grows, it's another aspect of reputation we should mention. It's sort of like scope, right? You might have a reputation among 30 people, or you might have the visibility where you have a reputation among hundreds of thousands or millions or tens of millions of people, right? And as that scope increases, the haters arrive, right? And I had a situation a couple of years ago where I put up a post and I had a major troll ragging on me. And because I know Rand Fishkin, I sent him an email and asked him his advice. So Rand, what should I do about this person? And Rand wrote a reply back to me. The first word in his email was, "Congratulations. If you have someone trolling you, you must be doing something right." All right? And then he gave me the rest of his thoughts on what to do. So that just comes with the landscape, and you have to understand that you're not going to make everybody happy. You can't. And if that's your goal, then you're not really going to be able to grow your scope very successfully, because you won't end up being you, right? I mean, whoever you are, right? Whether it's Zara Altair or Kristen Drysdale or Eamon Johns or William Rock, it's if you're true to yourself, you're going to have people who don't like what you're about. You have to sort of get over that. And if you're a sensitive type, and there's certainly a part of that to me. That's like, it's like and you want to go fix it, and then you realize, but wait a minute, they're flipping lunatic idiots. No, okay, that's maybe the or you have to learn that comes with the territory.
It does come with the territory, and that is a very good point, especially for people who are starting out. And that corollary of being yourself and being clear about it and not trying to please everybody is also very important, because you're going to have a muddy message if you're trying to please everyone. And if people don't respond to muddy messages. Our time is already over. I can't believe it. And I want to thank you so much, Eric, for being here. This has just been an incredible session of conversation and answering questions and heading us in the right direction, because we do want to have a good reputation for our brand. That's definitely something that we all want. And thank you again, Zapster audience, for all your participation and questions and comments. Without all that, this show would be, I don't know, talking heads, pretty dull. So I always like the more audience input, the better. So thank you. And then a special treat next week. William Rock is coming back again with part 2 of getting familiar with your data and Google Analytics. So I hope you join us then. Anyway, thank you, everyone, and thank you especially, Eric. Eric, any last words you want to share with us before we go off there?
I think the main thing is that we talked about monitoring your reputation. I'm assuming, of course, that you have some business purpose here, right? And growing your reputation and those things. Just know that you have to be patient. You have to experiment. You have to be persistent. It usually doesn't come fast. But if you stay true to yourself, you work hard at it, you add value to a lot of people along the way, your reputation, your visibility, and yes, your brand will grow.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being with us, and we'll see you next week.
All right.